Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Infirmary, where I and my guests try to help athletes in the endurance world stop making mistakes, stop hurting themselves, and get back on the path to success, happiness, and joy. I'm definitely a little nervous today because I have one of the coaches that I've admired my entire career, Gordo Byrn, here with me. And Gordo is a lifelong endurance athlete, coach, and author, and has lived a second life in the financial world, where he also offers advice and mentorship to those who are looking to improve their finances and their lives. Gordo is the 2002 Ultraman World Champion, where he won at the pinnacle of a sport that requires you to swim 10 kilometers, ride 420 kilometers, and then run a double marathon, all within the space of 3 days. I've gotten to crew for a few Ultraman athletes, and it is quite a thing. He's the author of Going Long, second edition in 2009, along with another coaching legend, Joe Friel. And then this book, which came out last year, From Lemon to Legend, a comprehensive guide to running, cycling, swimming, and triathlon, which he released in 2025 and had co-writing help from coaches John Hellemans and triathlon legend Julie Dibbins. Gordo also somewhat compulsively publishes on his Substack, Endurance Essentials, which could also be titled Coaching Essentials and can teach you everything you need to know to become the athlete you want to become for only $7 a month. You can read about Gordo's return to endurance after a 10-year hiatus, which culminated in him winning the 55 to 59 age group at Challenge Roth in a smoking 903. And as I've already said, personally, Gordo has shaped my coaching philosophy as his influence in the sport runs really deep and has mentored a generation of endurance coaches. I'm obviously a fanboy and quite excited to have him here today. Gordo, welcome to the Infirmary.
That was an amazing intro.
Thank you. A friend of mine once said that he wanted to make it his goal to achieve enough success to be introduced by me. So apparently I'm good at writing intros.
You got a knack for that.
Thank you. So, what I want to start with is, you were in the sport until 2012, helping run Endurance Corner and still racing. You stepped away for 10 years to raise your kids, raise a family, and then you returned in 2022. And what was the impetus for that return?
Yeah. So, let's talk about what took me out, and then we'll talk about what brought me back.
Okay.
So down in Tucson, there's a huge ride called the Aerobic Loop. And I don't know, it's like 120 miles, depending on where you start. It's about 200K. And I was getting ready for Ironman Arizona. I had taken a break from Ironman racing, but not from triathlon. I was still doing a lot of racing, a lot of stuff. And at the end of the ride, I was absolutely ripping, doing a main set, and 5 dogs came out of the desert. I T-boned one of them, and I'm really happy I didn't break my neck.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, I went flying over the bars. I landed flat on my back and cracked a bunch of stuff in my ribs. So that gave me mandatory downtime. And that mandatory downtime, I took advantage of it to look very deeply at how I was living.
Mm-hmm.
We were building a young family, my wife and I was spending an incredible amount of time and energy still trying to be really fast. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you know the deal there.
Yep.
And I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a break. And so I took what I thought was a short break, turned out to be a 10-year break. Okay. I was active every day in my break.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's like, well, why come back? Well, my wife and I, there was a couple things that really stood out to me. And one was we decided to go in the Grand Canyon, rim to rim to rim. We slept on the North Rim, so we didn't do it in one go.
Got it.
But on the second day, I get to the bottom of back to Phantom Ranch. Monica's having a blast. She's just loving the trip. But I am in such a deep hole. I'm like buried. And I was like, and I'd done it before. Normally I just run down to the bottom and run back up. But I'm like, this is going to be pretty challenging to get out of this canyon now. And it was just a death march up and out. And I was like, wow, I'm like, am I out of shape? Am I old? What's going on here?
Mhm.
And I had lost something which was a core part of my capacity, my identity. And it was really obvious to me when we did that 2-day trip together.
Mhm.
So I was like, all right, I'm going to take 1,000 days and just try and get back into shape. And at that beginning point, I didn't know what was possible because I had 10 years off running and I had an injury history, hadn't been swimming for 10 years. And I've been riding, I've been skiing a lot. I would
Mhm.
and lifting a lot of weights. What I didn't know was the result of lifting all those weights was I was very inefficient
Mhm.
from a energy flexibility point. So it was extremely easy for me to get my lactate up,
Mhm.
and I was very explosive, and I had become extremely inefficient with riding a bike, running, and swimming.
Mhm.
Obviously, running and swimming, I hadn't done them. You'd expect me to be inefficient,
Mhm.
but I'd been riding and skiing a lot, and including uphill skiing. But that wasn't enough. Now I'd kind of forgotten, in a sense, when you're an elite athlete, you become very efficient
Mhm.
in any way you want to define efficiency. So relative to how much we eat, relative to just taking, relative to how much energy it takes to produce a certain amount of power, all that stuff. And I was like, okay. And I realized that when I came back, I would get really tired
Mhm.
quite quickly. And my heart, because I had kept training, I don't I was still like I could still go pretty hard for 60 minutes to an hour and a half, and
Mhm.
then the wheels would totally fall apart. Uh, and so there was a high cost to the all the training I did, and I couldn't really figure it out. But I had my background in coaching and my technical background on the exercise science side, practically speaking. So I started testing and digging in that, and I realized what was going on. And so the motivation was just to get really just to get healthy again so I could stop losing capacity.
Mhm.
One of the things that I loved about being in fabulous shape was how big my world is.
Mhm. I hear you.
I'd be like, I'm in Boulder and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to ride my mountain bike over the Continental Divide to Winter Park. I'm going to eat lunch and then I'm going to ride home. And you could just dream up these crazy workouts and just go out and do them. And I got such a kick out of doing that. And in my, so now we're sort of like early 50s, it was like, there's no way I could do that. So my world had shrunk.
Mhm.
Uh, and everybody will experience this. Live long enough, you're going to experience it, right? Because if you're 105 years old, you're not going to be banging out century rides probably. And so it's just a gradual whittling away, and we don't really notice it first. But athletes notice it, I think, earlier than many people because we have such big capacity when we're younger and well trained.
Mhm.
So I wanted to push that capacity back out. And then, so that's like, say, the first year. And it was really challenging to get my body moving again. But because I had made this promise to myself that I would just do what I could do and give it my best shot, I was committed to trying things differently
Mhm.
than in the past. And the main difference was most of my training was ridiculously easy. Like it was so easy and so short that I really didn't think it was going to work. And let me give you an example. So, like my run workout
Mhm.
would be walk 10 minutes and then 3 intervals. But my intervals are 9 minutes of jogging, 1 minute of walking, and then walk another 10 minutes at the end. So it's a 50-minute workout. I got 27 minutes of jogging. The most my calves could handle was 3 times a week.
Yeah.
If I did any more than that, my hamstring would go funny, my calf would start locking up, and I was like, wow, there's no way this is going to work. But I can do this. So I'm just going to do it and see what happens. And I couldn't believe it. I actually got better at running from what I mean, that wasn't even a warm up when I was an elite. I
Yeah.
mean, it was half of what I would do. Like no matter how tired I was, you could wake me up in the middle of the night and I'd go run 20K for you when I was an elite. But this was like a tiny little piece, not even a workout, but I could still ride a bike and the cycling was well tolerated. Same deal with swimming. I restarted swimming. I started doing some of my favorite workouts. And then I just get so blasted, like a 4K swim, I'd be wrecked. And I was like, okay, got to back up. What would I do if I was coaching a middle-aged guy? So this has been useful because I have coached people from scratch. And I was like, okay, I wrote a program for myself. And then I also published it on the internet at the same time to make sure that I would actually do the whole program, because it would be embarrassing to publish a program and then say, well, actually I tanked at week 6 and had to quit. So I did the whole thing. But the program was just like the runs. It was the swims started at 1,500 meters and gradually over the weeks, so 10-week program, you get to a 2K swim. And so you're only swimming 3 times a week, no more than 2K a pop. And it's all pretty chilled out. There's a little bit of testing and some pace changes. So I learned my zones and I could figure out, how I was doing. And I got better. And from that 10-week, like just getting moving, I've kind of just kept going since then. So all I needed was to get through that 10-week startup phase in the swimming, which really surprised me. And then I was enjoying it and I was able to swim. I was not efficient. That's taken a long time. That's an ongoing process. It's still going, but I was kind of getting moving. And then in the background, there's just a lot of easy cycling going on to try and wake the body up metabolically. And because I came into it really strong, I actually made a choice for 6 months not to lift, because I wanted to, well, in hindsight, I wanted to put the energy into exercise, but I think it also helped me because my lifting had a huge sympathetic component, meaning there's a big nervous system component. There's a lot of nervous system fatigue. So looking back, that was a good choice because those sessions were very stressful, even if they didn't require a lot of physical energy. I don't burn a lot of kilojoules when I'm in the gym. So that kind of got me rolling. And then at the end, this is 2022. At the end of that year, I did go into the gym. I did a set of what I thought was easy squats, and I was so sore. I was like, okay, I got to bring back a little lifting. I can't just go to 0. I got to go to a maintenance program. And so I brought back a little bit, and then I was fine. So then I was back to, roll forward. I've been going for about, say, 8 months. In that 8 to 12 month period, I'm back to training like a triathlete. So it's swim, bike, run, a little bit of strength, but everything's all pretty easy because if I do anything hard or sustained, I get super tired. So, and then I'm doing my little tests and my tests show I'm improving. Where the improvement came was with lactate testing. So because my efficiency is low and staying low, if you were looking at my pace and power per heart rate, you wouldn't see much change. You might think if somebody's listening and they're at the beginning, they might think, oh, I'm not getting better. And there was a bit of that. But with my lactate testing, I could see internally and metabolically, I was improving, and I found that super motivating because I knew what the implication was. The implication being, as I produce the same work with a lower lactate value, my top end's improving, even if I'm not testing it or training it. I will be able to get higher for longer. And my durability, which is my ability to hold any effort over time, is going to be improving. So it was great. It was encouraging. That was kind of like the first year. And then I started thinking, okay, what events? And then I started looking at different events and figuring out if I might be able just to complete them, like enter it and kind of survive and get through it. And that kind of got my mind back in the whole getting just participating. So getting back into participation. And then in 2024, I did the Alp Tri at the end of a build, and that's the Alp d'Huez triathlon. And I won my age group, and my time was faster than the guys 5 years younger than me too. And then I was like, okay, now I'm back to being able to compete.
Hmm.
And so now it's a different mindset. At this stage, I've been going for, say, I'm more than 1,200 days in. It's about trying to figure out what I can do,
Hmm.
me versus me, and try and figure that out. And so that's kind of where I'm at now.
Nice. So many questions out of all that. First of all, why did you pick 1,000 days?
So when I was a coach, I used to tell athletes when they joined the team, I was like, "Hey, I need you to suspend judgment for 500 days." So in other words, you got to give me 2 seasons
Hmm.
before you're going to make any decision on whether this is working.
Hmm.
And this is my approach is a very long-term approach. So it's holistic, whole body. We are going to make you a very fit and efficient human.
Hmm.
If we do that, if you do the work, you're going to be racing way faster than you can even imagine now. And
Hmm.
and that was like the big picture. As well, when I was I don't think I'd even started racing pro. I was whatever the stage is before a neo pro. So it's kind of
Hmm.
like, highly motivated amateur with illusions of grandeur, and not that fast. I was
Hmm.
down in New Zealand, and I met Scott Molina, and he's like, "Well, how long are you going to give this? We're just riding up a hill
Hmm.
someday." And I don't know. I was just happy to have given myself a chance to train as much as I could and try and get better. And he's like, "Well, I think you should give it 3 years before you decide if you have potential." And so it was similar to kind of what I used to tell people, but Molina knew, well, looking at me, he knew I had a long way to go, and he also but he didn't say that. So
Yeah.
he what he said, Hellemans didn't say it either. Hellemans is just like, how's this guy going to become decent?
Uh,
And they were both very supportive, because they knew that it's not possible to know how good an athlete's going to become.
mhm.
The only way we can find out is the athlete has to do the work, and you got to see what happens. And so I did the work, and when Melina told that to me, so that would have been November of 2000. So if you roll forward 2 years, and I won Ultraman, so obviously there were signs of uh, having capacity
Mhm.
well before I hit the 3 year mark, and so that's kind of how that whole 1,000 day thing. I also find to achieve anything, there are going to be a lot of obstacles, problems, challenges that pop up.
Mhm.
And if you promise yourself that you're going to follow 1,000 day time horizon, then these problems, it makes them smaller. They're just little blips. I mean, if I'm going to do my best over 1,000 days, then as soon as a niggle starts turning up, well, I better deal with it, because it's not about grinding through this week. It's about like 100 weeks from now,
Mhm.
and it's a long way out. So it has that effect. So it moderates the emotional impact of a short-term setback, because
Mhm.
you're very long-term focused. The other thing is, I think a lot of folks get too wrapped up in the near term, meaning the moment. So they'll be hammering along and trying to win the day.
Mhm.
It's not about winning the day. Or they'll put some race or something in their calendar, some sort of expectation that's going to happen, I don't know, 3 weeks or a month or 2 months from now. And that's going to constrain their ability to be sensible. It's like, yeah, I should rest. I can see I'm grinding myself down, but I'm 3 weeks into an 8-week build for some race, and I just can't do it now. I have to keep going because of the race. So if you get rid of all that and don't sign up for any races, and make the game about just rolling the week in, week out, and you're just going to wait, and when I'm fit, that's when I'll race. I'll race when I'm fit, not when I put some day in my schedule. Mentally, it's just way more relaxing.
Mhm.
And when you're more relaxed and there's less stress, you're going to get better adaptations. And so that's kind of the mindset part of it. And I found it really helpful. Same deal with rebuilding my social media, my writing practice, all the stuff on my public facing part of my life. If it's about 1,000-day pacing, then I ask myself, well, can I do this for 150 weeks? Can I produce one video a week for 150 weeks? Can I write 3 articles a week for 150 weeks? If the answer is yes, okay, that's what it's about. And then I focus on that and I pay attention to where people respond, and we can dig a little deeper in that. And so the book, the order of the chapters in From Lemon to Legend is basically the number of views of the article that relates to it that I wrote.
Amazing.
On my Substack. So I was writing about everything I knew about. And then I was like, okay, let's look at all the views. And I look at the views, and then I rank everything. And then it's like, okay, so that's a table of contents in a sense. Are there any gaps? Okay, so there might be some gaps on things that I think are important that maybe people hadn't noticed, because to do a book, I wanted it to be comprehensive. And then I sort of put that in, and then I was like, okay, I want to build a following. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to publish preview chapters for the paid list. So the people that are most passionate have connected the most to me and the work. And so I'm not going to go to a traditional publisher. I'm going to do a chapter. And again, my minimum was a chapter a month. And this worked great until I got about halfway through the book in terms of the chapters and the list. And then I was like, okay, and that's the easy part. So that's like, call that like 1/4 of the work. Then you have to do the rest of the chapters, and that'll get you to a rough draft. And then you have to clean up the rough draft. And if you're writing with partners, you have to get everybody to sign off on the draft, and then you have to design the book. And I'd never done any of that myself because the publisher handles that. So that process took about 2 years to get actually to the point we were at the book. And I learned a lot. And so one of the things, so now I'm on the second book, How to Train, and it's the same idea, but it's being done much more efficiently in terms of execution. So it's great.
You said when we talked last month that this first book was more for you than for your audience. Can you tell me what that means?
So John and Julie are 2 people I really respect. They are very experienced, both individually as high performance athletes over a very long period of time. So John won world titles amateur titles at 40 and at 60. So 20 years apart, kind of a neat little thing. And in between a whole bunch. So on that Olympic distance, he was very tough to beat when he was on. Julie, phenomenal athlete. When I was racing, she was one of the few females that was able to ride like an elite male. So it's extremely fast. Also outstanding swimmer. So the swim bike combo was just really impressive. So I knew that they had a lot to teach me. And so the project was really exciting. It was like, okay, well, I could have them teach me, and we're going to use the book as an excuse for me to ask them a ton of questions, to write down everything they tell me, and then to make them proofread it to make sure I've understood what they told me. And this is going to result in a manual that I can use for the rest of my life as a reference book on any topic I want. So all the stuff that's in there is my favorite stuff from John and Julie, as well as my own experience. And so you get about 100 years of coaching experience in one location. And that was great. And I felt that it wouldn't be, they probably I probably could have paid them just to talk to me, like hire them as coaches, and then I ask them a ton of questions. We do a bunch of calls, and we do the same process. But it seemed better if we did it together and just brought everybody in as like a team and a project to produce the book. The best knowledge in sports is not the people that are writing and making videos. It's the people that are working with the athletes day in, day out. John and Julie are those sorts of people who've done it for decades. So it's tough to get the best information if you want it as a athlete, or if you're not in these little niche squads where you can access the people. And so that's what I wanted to offer people in terms of the book. And it turned out, yeah, I really like the finished product.
Yeah, it's a great book. I have enjoyed reading it over the past month, and took it home with me to Maine on my break, and I was just sitting there while it was sort of snowing, reading along. But I want to jump back just a little bit, because basically what you were describing when you returned is that you had become, these terms are all, everybody uses different terms or everything like that, but you'd become much more of like an anaerobic machine, like you're able to, produce a lot of lactate really fast, but you were really struggling with what you called, efficiency, like with the ability to go long and not spend a lot of energy. And one of the questions I think I'll field from this show is, okay, I'm new to the sport, so I don't have a lot of fitness, or I have that profile of being able to create a lot of lactate fast because I've got a lot of muscle mass.
Yeah.
What would you say to athletes in those positions, those two different spots?
So I make it really simple for people. So we're going to look at those individuals on two dimensions. So the first dimension we're going to look at is how big's your engine? And this works really well for cycling. It's like, how many liters of VO2 are we looking at? Not per kilo. It's like, and so if it's an explosive CrossFit, High Rocks athlete, male or female, they're likely to be big engine athlete, what I call big engine athlete. Whereas we've got somebody that's slight, classic runner's build, that's going to be either a medium engine or a small engine type athlete. So we see where they are. It's a continuum. And again, people often, you're going to need a little bit of data, because the way we see ourselves is not necessarily the way we are. For instance, at a run club, I'm gigantic. But if I go to Gold's Gym, I'm tiny. I'm not like, at my strongest, I was in the gym and some guy comes up to me and he's like, "You're really strong for a little guy." So it's all context dependent. So this is where a sport, talking to a sports scientist to help you kind of sift through it a bit can make you a bit more rational. But so big engine, small engine, we got a continuum. The other continuum, which I like to look at vertically, is where are the break points, particularly the low end break points. So what I call first lactate threshold. There's different ways to look at it. But it's like, what is your low end fitness like? And so if you can think about it, now we've got engine size, and we've got how much of that engine we can use for a long time. So CrossFit athlete, big engine, it's going to have low break points because very explosive. And so we're going to have to teach that athlete not to rev the engine. And we're going to have, and so they might not like it. Some people might not do it. I mean, what I was doing was a lot of time sitting on a bike trainer, riding a very even effort with my heart rate at, I don't know, 65% of max, 55% of max. I mean, it was low. I mean, anywhere from 105 to 115 beats. And my max at the time, say my max was 160. It's a little higher now because I've been able to access a bit more. But so it's really, it's like a why bother feeling, especially if you're a CrossFit guy or a High Rocks guy and you're used to absolutely smashing yourself. You're like, there's no way this is going to work. This is just silly. I mean, this is like walking, and kind of is. So that's one extreme.
Yeah.
The other is you've got an athlete and they got that classic ectomorphic build, and they might be pretty well trained, so the break points might be up, but the issue is they're dealing with a small engine. So we're gonna have to teach that athlete a couple things. We're gonna teach them, look, you got to get over your fear of eating, because if I look at a body type, I know how that person eats, regardless of what anybody says. That I know if you look at someone's body type, you know how they eat and how they train.
Yep.
And so we're going to have to support that athlete emotionally to sort out the nutrition. And if we get that done and we start training appropriately, we can get a bigger engine. And this is traditional strength. This is sports specific strength. And by bigger engine, it's not like we got to gain 30 pounds of muscle or something. We need to, a few kilos in the right spot can make a big difference to people. And I think that's another misunderstanding. So I'm 57 now, and yeah, I'm not as buff as when I was 27, but I'm pretty much, I'm pretty close to where I was when I was 37, because I've had this focus on maintaining my engine size, my muscle mass across my whole life. And it's a huge advantage every decade that rolls on. I coached more muscular guys when they were younger, and they're always trying to shed the muscle. And I would say, no, we want to keep that. It's going to be very useful later for you. And likewise, if you do the training and you're over muscled, well, your body's going to figure that out, and it's going to shed it, because the muscle is relatively expensive. Your body's going to change as a result of the training. So that's kind of how I would look at it. It would, to understand and understand like objectively where you are. And that's where, working with somebody who's worked with different types of athletes, helped athletes achieve the goals you want to achieve, can be helpful, because we can put it all into context. Now, a little story about that. There's a book called Training the Uphill Athlete. And in the book, there's a neat little section, which is a strength evaluation for upper body and lower body. And when I came back, I was like, came across this, and I was like, I'll do the assessment. So I'm like 10 out of 10 on everything in there. And I'm like, that gave me the comfort. Okay, maybe I should be focusing somewhere else rather than, reinforcing a strength. So that's part of why I said, I'm just going to take a break. And instead of taking a break and taking my strength training to 0, if I'd taken it to 2 by 20 minutes, that probably would have been a better choice. And so for people listening, some is nearly always better than none. And that goes for plyometrics, sprinting, all this stuff. If you just do a little bit, you can capture quite a bit of benefit with hardly any fatigue and no downside. So these little things that you'll hear about, you're going to be tempted to think you have to give yourself a big dose to benefit, and you don't. These little doses can be quite useful, like a little set of back squats here or there, a little bit of leg press, a little bit of jumping on and off a box, 5 times a week. You're going to do an uphill stride that's high power but not high fatigue or high stress. These things all add up, all these little things, into making us better.
Yeah, the phrase "some is better than none" is, also could be like the subtitle of From Lemon to Legend. It comes up so much in the book. And, it's one of those things that underlies your commitment to consistency, because that's, basically what you're selling. You just brought up the term emotional in this past, talking about like, okay, how do we work with an athlete who, how do we coach them emotionally to change their eating? Like eating is a hugely emotional part of who we are as people. And I dug around on Endurance Essentials for like an hour this morning, trying to find that phrase that we talked about last month that I had seen from you. And maybe I misremembered it, but I remember you writing something about athletes using endurance sports to basically reprise their emotional pain. Yeah. And first of all, I want to make sure I got that right. And then second of all, like, can you describe what that means and how you've seen that in play both in yourself and in the athletes you've worked with?
So there's a lot of dimensions to that. So I entered sport before we had iPhones and MP3 players and anything. So one of the things that surprised me with my long rides, which were all done without music, was the amount of noise that I would process while riding. And it was fascinating to me, all this stuff that would come up and then leave. So it's great. I mean, it sounds, when I listen to people talk about meditation, it sounds a bit like that. So there's a physical component of getting things out of our heads. And that's something that the low end exercise is really good at giving us. Now, if your training program is all zone 3 or higher, listening to Rage Against the Machine, you're missing out, because you're not going to get that component. You're not going to get that psychological benefit into your larger life. So you want to think about that, because there's a lot of benefits that you're missing out in your actual life, in the quality of your ability to think and concentrate, all of that. So that would be one component. And I would say, you should have some periods in your week, in your long workouts, where you're just really relaxed. You're not amped on anything. You're not using music. You're just chilling, and you're training. That can be really valuable. So that's kind of like one end of the spectrum. Then I noticed something. I noticed that fatigue and slowing down is largely mental. So this is before the central governor theory and all this other stuff. We would take great athletes that had never been able to qualify for Kona, amateurs, real strong guys and women, and they would come to our camps, and they would be 8 to 12 day camps. And around day 5, they would think they were totally shattered and wrecked, and they would have to, they'd have to sit on my wheel for 7 hours, and they would get through it. Or they would have a bad day, and then the next day they were fine. Or randomly, they would do this amazing time trial on day 8 or something. And there was all these weird things that would happen to them. And what we had done is we had reconfigured their thinking so that Ironman was just a day. So it wasn't this huge thing. The huge thing was this camp that they had survived with Scott and me. It's now called Epic Camp. It's run by Johnny Newsom. And we had completely reconfigured their brains. Same body. They go back, they do the same training, but it's the same body, and they get a completely different result, because the only thing that changed was in their head. So that is something that sport can bring to us. And that is really a form of perspective. When we get to a point in a workout or in a race, and all of a sudden we start flipping out, maybe internally, or the fear starts to escalate and this stuff is coming up on us, these more extreme experiences let us just let it go. And we get to, ideally we get to nothing. We get to a pure performance state. But, if you can't get there and it's still really comfortable, maybe you just accept it and you're like, well, this is going to be okay. I'm not going to fold. I'll just keep going.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll slow down a little bit. It's fine. And so that's another component. So we've got the fatigue component, the meditation type component. Then there's another one. Most of us are unaware of our emotional patterns. The people that live with us are aware of them. Our family is aware of them, but we are not aware of them. They might sound familiar. If you get that person really tired, or you give that person a set of intervals where they might fail, it will become obvious to them, if they're paying attention, what their pattern is. And it can be really subtle. It's even like, if I give you a set of 12 800s, how are you going to pace it? I don't lay it out for you. I say, we're looking for this kind of effort. How are you going to pace it? Is it going to be really conservative and then you're going to settle in, and then you're going to totally blow the doors out on the last one because you figure that's what's best for you. That's a common strategy.
Mhm.
Or you're going to start too fast, fade for a bit, and then you'll get quicker again at the end. These types of things. So we can surface these patterns with how we do it. We can also surface our stress responses. How do we deal with setbacks? These types of things. The way we deal with stuff in sports is the way we deal with stuff in everything, because it's the same person. It's us. So then, if we don't like the way we're dealing with stuff in sport and we're an amateur, it is a very low stakes environment to make some changes. So you can work with somebody. So like, hey, I can give you some, I notice you have a tendency as soon as your heart rate goes up to, ride really hard. And those types of people explode quite easily in the real world, say. Or you do random attacks on the group ride for no reason. That habit might happen off the bike too. And we can challenge the person, because it's an emotional challenge. We could say, you know what, I want you to go out, and instead of attacking, I want you to get dropped and just deal with how that feels. And they'll discover that actually it's not that big a deal. Or if you're always holding back because you're worried about blowing up, we are going to do a race where we try to blow you up. And how did it feel? And how does it feel afterwards? And you can create these emotional breakthroughs using sport that then make the person more emotionally resilient outside of sport. And that is, for me, the absolute favorite part of like working with amateur athletes, is using the sport to give life skills, and then they get better at everything, not just getting better at sport. So those would be kind of the components, and making it, because really what's a coach doing? A coach is making errors or habits that can hold back performance visible in a way that doesn't cause resentment, and then offering tools to get past those habits and become more effective in sport, which also works in life.
When you returned to endurance training and racing, did you experience that yourself?
Endless setbacks.
Yeah.
So there's a book called The Beginning of Infinity, and it's by David Deutsch, and I read it like a philosophy text. And one of the central tenets is problems are inevitable, but you can solve your problems with the right knowledge. And so many people don't deeply accept that. So they don't have the experience that they can solve their own problems. And they don't have the experience of searching out knowledge and trying different ways to get past the problem. So when I was younger, it won't surprise you that somebody that won Ultraman would always go to volume and more work to solve every problem. I'm just going to outwork this problem. That works to a point. But as you age, you lose the ability to outwork problems because your body won't let you. Like my legs wouldn't let me. I mean, I was just doing my little 9-minute jogging segments instead of, clearing my schedule and doing a 100-mile run week, which is what I kind of wanted to do. I kind of still want to do it, but I can't. So I got to come up with another way to solve the problem. Likewise, I would get to the point when I was training where I ran out of, I had some issues with my hamstrings and I ran out of ideas. I'd tried everything, uphill, stretching, strengthening, eccentric loads, rolling them. Nothing worked. And I was like, I got to the end of the line. And I was like, well, there's my friend Justin Dare recommended his PT. And so I go to the PT and she has new knowledge. So new knowledge comes into the problem and she helps me solve the problem. So that's another thing. If you have a problem that seems intractable, it's probably the way you're looking at it, the way you're defining the problem. You need to have somebody that's outside of your thinking, outside of your box, come in and assist. And so that can be really helpful. Another example of a setback, I'm super motivated. I started in April of 2022. July, I get COVID. So basically, I have an off season. It was pretty bad dose. I got 3 weeks of doing nothing. What felt like nothing. I mean, the last 10 days, I was kind of getting moving again, but it's 21 days and not much. And so major setback right at the beginning. Go into that first winter, get sick 3 times, having to back off. Why are these things happening? Well, part of the reason is a lack of resiliency. So one of the things I found the low end training gives me is it makes me much more resilient. So as I'm stacking these years and being smart about my adaptation, my recovery, I'm becoming more resilient. I'm getting sick less. It doesn't mean I'm having less problems. This is an important thing. We never get to a state of no problems. We can get to a state of coping well with our problems, which is different. It's like, yeah, I got some things going on, but I'm coping well with them. I'll give you an example there. This winter so far, I've trained through plantar fasciitis and I trained through calf injury. I've been running every week. So I'm able to do this because I have the emotional maturity to back off at the first sign of trouble. I don't try and grind through. So as soon as something pops up, I'm on it as if I'm injured. So I'm doing the rehab immediately. I'm dialing the specific stress down that's causing the issue. And it just lets me keep going. As a triathlete, I have so many modes of exercise that all I need to do is keep that little bit of running. I'd proven that to myself 3 years ago. Just keep that little bit of running in there and just keep rolling on everything else. I'm going to be okay. And same deal. Everybody talks about how brutal plantar fasciitis is. Well, it's brutal because we don't notice it when it's this little bud. We wait until it's a full-grown injury to back off. I mean, I got rid of it in 3 weeks, and it was just straightforward. I just went straight into the rehab, and it was fine. So that would be, if I could put one thing into everybody's head, would be, yeah, you can solve your problems. You just need to be smart about it. And again, this all feeds into that 1,000-day view. It's not about getting through the week. It's about getting through like the whole year and developing myself as an athlete overall.
So that propensity to work through everything and high volume, and in your earlier career, like when you're in your late 20s, early 30s, we're gonna get like Freudian here. Like, where's that come from?
So, well, I got a lot of energy. I mean, I think that's, the fundamental. I really enjoy training. I respond to exercise. I mean, we used to talk about fatigue intoxication. Like, I mean, we would, it was like you were high. So there's definitely some neurotransmitters, neurochemistry involved with my experience of exercise and the way I go about it. So there's that, and that's very real. So it goes to motivation, goes to what I enjoy to do. The one thing I wish I understood better was the power of low stress days. So another thing that's really unique about me is across a year, half my days are low stress days. And truly low stress days. I did a day, yesterday's a good example. Swim, bike, and run, 3 hours of exercise, average heart rate of 100. And there's a lot of exercise there, but there's a lot of benefit there. So I'm benefiting from prior load, so stressful things. I'm adapting to that. But likewise, I'm refilling my nervous system. My nervous system was not stressed at all yesterday. And these days where I'm not stressing my nervous system, prepare my nervous system for when I need it for a hard or a challenging session. And I think people, elites and amateurs with busy lives, would be well served by thinking about how many days out of 365 they're actively hitting that sympathetic system. And I think, I think many people are stressing themselves 5 to 7 days a week in some form.
Mhm.
And whether that stress is in the form of alcohol or anger or high intensity exercise or simply just not feeling like there's enough hours in the day, it has an impact on adaptation and it has an impact on health.
Mhm.
And so I think that's what I missed by being that sort of always pushing through.
Mhm.
I did not fully benefit from the work that I was doing.
Mhm.
And honestly, that's one out of two key explanations for how I'm so fast right now at this
Mhm.
age. The other explanation is the bikes are way better.
Yeah.
So I think a modern bike at race pace requires 90% of the power I had to put out. So when people see the times that, if somebody's my age, if they're in their 50s and they're seeing
Mhm.
the times that the elites are putting up, the bike component is big.
Yeah.
I hadn't fully appreciated that. I had friends when I was an elite who told me, but I didn't listen to them. I was like,
Mhm.
I can't make that big a difference. Turns
Mhm.
out it makes a big difference. So
Does that impulse, that doesn't make a difference, does that show up in other parts of your life?
it's still there.
Yeah.
Obviously yeah. So I like to study everything in detail, and then I like to just break it down. I
Mhm.
mean, honestly, like if you can't put your protocol on a Post-it note, I'm
Mhm.
sort of like you're overthinking it. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of little things that go into a big performance.
Yeah.
But all you need to do is really learn those little things and they become like little heuristics. So they help you make choices. But the
Mhm.
stuff that moves the needle is very simple. It's adaptive volume, it's adaptation and recovery, and it's getting the nutrition right so that you benefit from these two things.
Mhm.
And then there's some equipment stuff in that. But the things that really move the needle are very simple, and the stuff that we can spend mental energy on it's endless.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so I'm constantly kind of reminding myself not to get distracted by that stuff. Keep focusing on the big ticket items.
Mhm.
And it's honestly it's easier when you're older.
Yeah.
I think you can get into that mindset if you're an elite. It's like, oh, I need to be thinking about everything, but I'm not sure. I listened to Olaf Alexander Boone. He talks about the guys are now at the beginning, you're adding, and then you get to a certain level and you're kind of, you're simplifying.
Mhm.
So I've always been on the simplifying side. It's kind of like, I just don't need to worry about that. Likewise, this is most important in our heads because there's a lot of stuff we could pay attention to. I'm not
Mhm.
talking about sport, but it will impact sport. When I was an elite, I would tell people, look, every thought I have slows me down. And what I meant by that is all these distractions, getting wrapped up in other people's business and other people's lives.
Mhm.
That's not what I need to be doing. I need to be doing my training and relaxing. My oldest daughter is very good at that.
Mhm.
So she's just kind of like, I'm just not like I'm not paying attention to that. I'm just gonna, do my training, do my school, and just not get wrapped up in the drama.
Mhm. Nice. I think I got time for two more questions. And the first one is I want you to kind of explain what you just said about adaptive volume, because one of the things I kind of want to get out there from you is what is happening physiologically, as you are making these changes? Because
Yeah,
again, especially speaking to that, late 20s Gordo, early 30s Gordo,
yeah,
and getting through to be like, this is why this is going to work. And
right.
so I want to ask that question. And then what you just did with the sticky note, if you can't put your protocol on a sticky note, we are going to finish with what is your protocol,
Okay.
which could also be like, what is your mission,
Yeah.
basically, but so one nuts and bolts question, and then we're going to go, big philosophical, fireworks at the end.
Adaptive volume is a concept I got from Alan Cousins, which I felt was really well put.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked at, his time working at the Aussie Institute of Sport, and the athletes he's worked with. He's noticed that everybody for their, so we've got the physiology, we've got the life stress. Everybody's got a point, or if you give them more, you make them slower.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things he's discovered when he starts working with an amateur, they're almost always faster doing less with him than what they were doing on their own initially. So it's you back them off and then you build them up. So that was kind of an interesting thing. So this concept of adaptive volume. So it's kind of like, all right, so how might I boost my adaptive volume? Well, pretty easy. You gotta take stress down to take volume up. We also need to create space for volume because a 12-hour training week is actually about 24 hours of time. And this is something I noticed, which was really strange. It's kind of like, oh, so if you think that you want to train 20 hours like an elite and you don't have at least 30 hours of space, you are going to fall apart. When I was a working athlete, I had a pretty serious job working as a partner in a private equity firm. If I did 1 hour too much, I would tip myself over. So let's say I'm rolling at 18 hours and I do one too many or two too many. So it's 10%. 10% too much meant that I actually fell off. I would get sick. My consistency would fall apart. So this breakpoint concept is about staying under the limits, and instead of focusing on the training, focusing on boosting the things that would enable more training. And actually, one of the things you might discover is that you get better on the same amount of stress because it's not necessarily about the training. It's about what's happening in the rest of the life. So that would be, the big picture of adaptive volume. Now, if you are an athlete, so that those young athletes, so let's talk directly to the 18 to 33-year-old demographic. I see you on X, I see you on Instagram crushing it. And I'm really happy for you because it reminds me of happy days in my own life. But when I see these people trying to cut weight, when they're pushing their total load, it makes me very sad because I can see what happens when it goes off the rails, which is a very big health issue. But more than that, if you can do the work, you've got a gift, but you have to make sure you benefit from the work. And so many people, and this happens in my peer group all around me in Boulder, so many people are not benefiting from their work because it's the breakpoint concept. They tip into what the scientists call maladaptive stress. So this happens way before we're sick or way before we're injured. We're just kind of not getting better, but we're working really hard. Well, there's a better way. You got to fuel appropriately. Half your days are easy. You got to maintain your vibe. Your energy has to be positive. And that's what it's about. And actually, that's winning because getting to a race and then performing at the race and feeling awful, everything around it. And then after the race, you might feel good for 24 hours, but then you're back to feeling awful again. Yeah. That's no way to live. There's a better way available to us. And that's the message I want to get out, generally.
Yeah.
So Post-it note. What is it? Well, number one thing is consistency is protocol. Consistency is protocol. And people don't accept that. They want to talk about 4x4 or whether their interval should be 6 minutes long or 8 minutes long or whether the rest interval should be 30 seconds or 40 seconds. They think that matters. That doesn't matter at all. There's so much stuff that moves the needle, and we are complex systems. You need to kind of just simplify it. So that would be the first thing. Consistency is protocol. So anything that's interrupting your consistency is not good for you. You got to figure out, well, you got to get rid of it if you can, or you need to work around it and get some advice on how you're going to be able to work around it. That would probably be the biggest thing. Right now, what's my training protocol? My training protocol is 10, 20, 50. All right?
Okay.
I'll explain that to you.
Yeah.
10 hour, 10 hours of cycling,
hmm
20 kilometers of swimming, 50 kilometers of running. If I can get myself to the point where I can do that 40 weeks a year, and the other weeks are focused on health, life, recovery, I know it's going to work.
hmm
So it's not even a Post-it note. It's basically 3 numbers.
Yeah.
To execute those 3 numbers will require me to use my 30 years of experience.
hmm
Okay? But it's really about those 3 numbers.
hmm
It's not about whether I'm polarized or pyramidal. It's not about my macro mix. It's not about any of these things. It's at a very simple level. That is what will drive the gains. And then as I'm executing this overriding Post-it note philosophy, I need to be smart. I need to see what's not working,
hmm
where my limits are, what happens to me when a race doesn't go well? What are the sessions I tolerate well? I need to talk to people. What are sessions that work, but for whatever reason, I'm scared of them, so I don't do them. I need to face my fears. So all that kind of stuff. But the fundamental, the 3 numbers, that's what's going to drive it with some consistency. But then we're learning around that.
What I love about that is that what you're essentially talking about is like set the life up first. Like
Yeah.
set the conditions that make those 3 numbers and a consistent application of those 3 numbers actually possible. And so it's not what you're doing, it's that you've created a life that makes that possible. Is that correct?
Yeah. So that was the 10 years, that is, by the way, that is not possible with 2 babies and a preschooler in the house.
Right. No.
And then we roll it forward. That is not possible with a preschool, like 2 preschoolers and a 4th grader in the house. So this 10-year break was being smart enough to realize it didn't fit in my life. And if I was going to fit it in my life, I was going to be on my own and I would be neglecting my family and things that are very important to me. But those are temporary periods.
Mhm.
And I'm going to be an empty nester in a few years. And it will be possible if I have created the conditions and the body
Mhm.
to capitalize on it. And so yes, it's a very kind of long-term thing. The other thing is, I guarantee there's a few people listening that are like, Gordo's absolutely nuts. There's no way I could or want to do that much exercise. Yes, that's kind of the point. There's probably a better way for many people to spend their time than trying to go really fast in a triathlon. Accept that. Figure out what's really going to drive your satisfaction and go all in on that. Make that your 1,000 days rather than sport. And and know what you really want to achieve in your life and get after it. Like be great at that, whatever it is. So that would be kind of my response. And then the final piece is 3 years ago when I started, I wrote an article on this. You'll see it appear. But I looked at, what were my 3 numbers 3 years ago? And obviously it wasn't 10, 20, 50. It was kind of like, so hours, it was 7. And the swimming was, I think, like 9. I was swimming about 9,000 a week. And then the running, I was probably in the 20s, say 27. So if you're really patient over 1,000 days and you know what you're trying to do, so I'm trying to build general capacity, then you can achieve it with these really long time horizons. The body is very adaptable. And you'll hear that over and over from elite coaches who have worked with many different athletes over many years. And you just have to trust that process, that remodeling of our internal physiology over very long time horizons. You can achieve tremendous things in your life.
Gordo, thank you so much for doing this. This has
Right.
been a huge highlight for me, and I really, really appreciate it. I appreciate the chat last month. I get it. You're a busy guy, and giving me a couple hours is a huge thing. Where can people get the book? Where can people follow you? Where can people get involved with what you're up to?
Well, the book's on Amazon. But I think the best place to find me is Substack and YouTube, depending on what you like. Are you video oriented or are you kind of read read-write oriented. If you read-write, come check us out on Substack. And if you prefer to watch videos, I got quite a nice library that's building up. What I'm doing right now is I'm doing 5-minute videos going through Lemon to Legend, highlighting the key parts of each chapter. We just wrapped up. We haven't published everything, but we just wrapped up doing the second chapter, the run chapter. The stuff that's already live is the first chapter, which is my philosophy of exercise. And then you can find me on X. If you want to see the actual training I do, everything's on Strava. And I think those are the best places to find me.
You can find Gordo on Instagram at @feeltheburn, which is BYRN. And he also told me when we chatted last month that if you get him in person, he will probably just give you a copy of the book. So travel to Boulder, track him down. You can get your book for free, minus the cost of traveling to Boulder.
Yeah.
But thanks again, man. I appreciate it so much. Great to hear my favorite training partner, Justin Dare's voice get tossed out there. So shout out to him. And I hope we get to meet in person someday.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Gordo. We'll talk soon.